presentation style is very hands-on, and it's like one of those, it reminds me of either of a Pinterest board or a DIY project, because they're so simple and so easy to do. You just think like, wow, why didn't I think of something like that? But anyway, a little bit of John's background. As I mentioned to you, he's a national religion consultant here for Sadlier. He received his administrative license in the Massachusetts Elementary School Principals Association, and is also certified as a coordinator of religious education. He's been involved in religious education as a catechist, a DRE. He's presented at many congresses and conferences in numerous dioceses. And as he's presenting, you'll find that John's enthusiasm is very catchy. As I mentioned, his presentations are practical and engaging, very hands-on for catechists, so that what you learn during his presentation, you could implement it in your session or in your classroom. If not the same day, then the next time that you meet. But all of his ideas and strategies and activities are centered on being able to help the catechist engage students as they learn more about their Catholic faith. And that engagement, I'm sure you'll all agree, is so important to not only motivate the children and their parents to learn about their faith, but also to empower them to live their faith. And that's what also then brings us into today's presentation on the 6 tasks of catechesis. Today is our 5th in the series of the 6, and it's on share, which is the participating in the life of the church. Just before John begins, let me just mention housekeeping details. First, welcome to those who have been with us. And in the past, we're so delighted you've come back and shared some time with us. And for those who are new to our webinars, thank you for joining us. We appreciate the trust that you've put in us to provide you in your own professional development. This presentation is being recorded. We will post it to our website, as well as later this week you'll receive an email with a certificate of attendance. On your screen you'll see a questions or chat box. Please feel free to answer or to ask any question or add a comment that John can address at the end of his presentation. And so without further ado, John, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you very much again, everybody, and John, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, and from the East Coast, I'll say good afternoon. I think it's afternoon for everyone, and again, thank you for joining us today. Debbie, described one of my characteristics as being practical, and I think that's one of my middle names. Another one is realistic, and another one is visual. I'm very visual. And those of you who may have attended a session I've done, it's very different from me sitting here at a computer talking than it is when I present and I have all kinds of things to show and share. So we'll see how things go today. As Debbie said, today is session 5 of the 6-part series on the 6 tasks of catechesis. And just to give you a kind of a sense of how I'm going to approach this today, I think we'll start first with a quick review of the 6 tasks from the National Directory. Then we'll focus on the share as one of the dimensions of catechesis and its relationship to the others. Importantly here, I want to talk about the ways the catechists incorporate share in their instruction in the classroom. And then I want to highlight some components of We Believe Catholic Identity that incorporate the 6 tasks, specifically share, that we'll be talking about today, as well as mention some other Sadlier resources that are available. And again, I think that middle target there, talk about the ways catechists incorporate it. They have such an important role in our programs. Yes, a lot of the other tasks relate to the instruction piece that they do and fulfill in their role as catechists. But I think share is more their witness of their own faith that comes out in the process of instructing and teaching your students. So we'll look at that a little bit more closely. So probably here not presenting or saying anything that we don't already know, but the definitive aim of catechesis is to put people not only in touch, but in communion and intimacy with Jesus Christ. I think that's nothing new for us. But also the fundamental task then is the formation of disciples. And I wonder how many of our catechists know that that's what they're about. Not just passing on faith, but forming disciples. Also, catechesis is a comprehensive and systematic formation in the faith. And that comprehensive formation includes more than instruction. It's an apprenticeship of the entire Christian life. I wonder if how many people have thought, or if you even yourselves have had in your own mind the notion of apprenticeship as what the process of catechesis is all about. If there's an apprentice, and if it's apprenticeship, then certainly there's a master teacher. And I think that we look to Jesus as our master teacher in this process. We have a mission: go and make disciples. Teach them to observe all I've commanded you. And Jesus just said simply, go and do it. He didn't say, go learn how to make disciples, go learn how to teach. But he said basically, go and make disciples. Teach them. Tell them my story, and I will be with you always. So we see, and it's clear in the National Directory, this is reference 20, section 20 in the National Directory. Jesus formed his disciples. And how did he do it? He instructed them. He prayed with them. He showed them how to live by his own example. And he gave them his mission. And I'm sure many of you probably can think back years ago when we had a document that was called To Teach as Jesus Did. That came out in 1972. And if you think back on that document, it really focused on these 4 pieces that we're seeing here today before we had the National Directory. And when I was doing workshops for catechists years ago, and I'd go into a parish or into a program and I'd ask people, so what are you going to do this year? And they said, I'm going to be a teacher, a catechist. I said, and so what are you going to be doing? They said, well, teaching about the faith. And I said, anything else? And they said, well, they weren't quite sure. And I said, well, if that's all your director told you, then they didn't tell you the whole thing. They wanted to hook you in, thinking this is great, I can do this, but you really have to do some other things. Yes, you're going to teach the doctrine, but you're also going to build a community with your classroom as part of our parish community and the larger faith community. You're going to teach your children that we are people who pray and pray with them, and also that we are people who serve, that we serve as Jesus told us to do and to be his disciples. So I often think back before we had the 6 tasks, we had those, the 2 teachers Jesus did with basically the beginnings of what evidently and obviously turned into those 6 tasks. So our catechesis today is mirroring exactly what Jesus did, including those 6 fundamental tasks. Here they are. And I might mention, I know in this series, Victor Valenzuela, another one of our consultants, did a presentation that sort of was an overview of the 6 tasks. If you haven't checked that one out, I believe it's posted on the website as well too, and you can go back and get a kind of overview and all the 6 tasks that are involved in catechesis. And when we think of these, the first 4 pretty much match up to the 4 pillars of the catechism. And I think there's where a lot of our content comes from that we try to accomplish in our classes. The last 2, share, which we're going to talk about today, and live, which is another one that I'll be doing, I think, next week, these are a little bit different. This is looking at faith in action. And I think sometimes with our catechists, they see the what they're supposed to be teaching because it's in a book, the resource, but they sometimes might forget that it's ultimately leading to faith in action. And so how do we bring out the idea of sharing and living our faith? So we'll touch base on that. And if you think of that document I just talked about, to teach as Jesus did, they're all there. All of those 6 tasks are encompassed in that document that was a little bit long ago. So today we'll focus on share, and again, starting with the National Directory. A quote from John, "Love one another as I have loved you." And so catechesis encourages apprenticeship in Christian living. Jesus' command is a basis for the disciples' life, and it encourages disciples to be witnesses to the gospel daily in word and action. Keep in mind as we go to the next slide as well, the words I've put in red. Pope Francis in 2013, speaking, meeting with catechists of the Vatican, said, "People see the gospel first in the way we live. That is where they read the gospel." How true is that? You know, in the real world, I used to have when I was also a curriculum director, and I used to have a sign in my office, "In the real world, there are no jobs for filling in blanks." You have to be creative, you have to think, you have to collaborate. And I think it's true in the real world, people don't come up and ask us, what are the 7 sacraments? What are the 10 commandments? What's Jesus' law of love? But how we live and how we act, what we say, will certainly tell people everything that we know and what we believe in and how we are examples of discipleship. And we're all familiar with the 1 Corinthians. There are different ministries but the same Lord, different works. We all have different roles we play. So catechesis encourages preparation for participation in community life. It affirms our Catholic identity, at the same time promoting unity among all Christians, respecting the faith of others, reminding us of our common vocation through baptism to love and serve God, and reminding us that living a life of holiness means sharing the good news of Jesus and helping to build up God's kingdom. So again, if you think of the words that have been in red, and we've got the word encourage, affirm, remind, as part of the shared dimension of catechesis, these aren't as easy to put your hands around and grasp as teaching some of the faith key concepts that we try to do with some of the other four tasks. It's a lot easier when we have, we want kids to recite the Our Father, or say the act of contrition, or identify a sacrament, or name the 7 sacraments, or state the meaning of the Blessed Trinity. A lot of that's concrete, but when we're talking about sharing in the life of our faith community, it's taking what we know and putting into action, which is a lot more difficult, I think, sometimes for catechists to bring out in their classrooms, to see beyond it's just the instructional piece. It's trying to develop that sense of who we are and what we're called to be as a result of who we are and what we know. I'd like to think of maybe what we do with our students. They're really disciples in training. Our aim is not to produce students who know all the Catholic doctrine, but providing an environment in which young people can learn about their Catholic identity, our traditions, and then make that faith response to the invitation to live a life of discipleship. I think this is something that we hope that we can instill in our children, but I think hopefully we can create that environment which allows that development of their faith to happen. In Philippians we read, live according to what you have learned and accept it. I love this saying because I think it summarizes what we're about, where we teach doctrine, we teach about our faith. We hope that students will accept and believe what we're teaching, and as a result of their belief, live according to what they have learned and believed in. I think that's the whole essence of what we try to do. And so, looking at how do catechists help to bring this all about, this idea of being part of the community and sharing what I know about my faith with others, my family, and so forth. Let's see. I think that we can't deny that the catechist is the most important and effective component of our parish programs. And I do have to say, too, I think that for our Catholic schools, if any people might be here from our Catholic schools, I think that same is true about our Catholic school teachers. They're teachers of academics, and they're catechists as well, because catechists are the ones taking it from the content to the next level of inviting that response to be that follower of Jesus. The general director of the catechesis says the catechists must be able to be at one and the same time teachers, educators, pretty much the same thing, and witnesses of the faith. And I wonder how many people see that as they're in their role as catechists, that it's, yes, teaching or educating kids, but it's also being a witness of my faith. I like to tell catechists that it's more not so much what you say, but how you say it, the enthusiasm you bring, that are going to get kids to see that this is real to you, your faith is real, and you're sharing it with them. Pope Francis has a lot to say these days, doesn't he? And so I love reading his books, but also some of his homilies, I guess you'd say, or talks with catechists. This is from 2013, these quotes we're going to have on this slide here, in St. Peter's Square to mark the International Day for Catechists. He said, if people who keep the memory of God alive, they keep it alive in themselves, and they're able to revive it in others. How point on is that? We're keeping the memory of God alive, which means we're telling a story. We're storytellers. And a catechist is a Christian who puts this remembrance of the service of proclamation. He talks about this in his book a lot, The Joy of the Gospel. But, you know, in proclamation that we tell about God, His love for us and His people, that He gave His Son to come into the world to show us how to live, who suffered, died, and rose from the dead. There's what we proclaim. A catechist is a Christian who is mindful of God, who's guided by the memory of God in his or her entire life, and who is able to awaken that in the hearts of others. And he's very forward in saying it's not easy. It engages our entire existence. And I think how true that is. He also talks about catechesis as a vocation, being the catechist. It means leading people to encounter Christ by words in our lives and by giving witness. And again, I want to repeat the quote from Philippians. Live according to what you've learned and accepted, what you've heard me say, and what you have seen me do. I wonder if catechists see that. I know the difficulty in getting catechists these days, and sometimes catechists volunteer for different reasons, but it would be my hope, and I'm sure yours, that they see it as a ministry, something that they can do, the way that they share their faith in their parish. Pope also says in his other message to catechists in 2010, the faithful need witnesses rather than teachers. He's being very honest about what the role of the catechist should be. And next to home and family, the witness of the catechist may be pivotal in every phase of the catechetical process. I think that'll come up a little bit. He also said the act of believing must allow the joy of the faith to shine through. I think this is becoming one of my favorite quotes from Pope Francis. And he talks about the example of that when Mary was told she was going to be the mother of Jesus, and she hurried to visit her cousin Elizabeth, who was also with child, and just the joy and the excitement of sharing that. No doubt, complete faith in God, but her faith allowed that pure joy to shine through. We need to have that same act of believing, allowing the joy of the faith to shine through in our catechists. And he goes on, Pope Francis, to say, I urge you, live this ministry with passion and with enthusiasm. And this was a letter to Catechists 2012. Excuse me. And he goes on to further explain the word enthusiasm. He said it comes from the Greek, the roots are in the Greek, en theos, which is to say that bears a God within. And so if we're led by enthusiasm, enthusiasm is that experience of God active within me. I just think that he has some great ways to talk to us about our faith and about sharing our faith. So how do catechists share? By sharing their own faith, your celebrations with your family, the traditions you have, how you live what you know and believe. And I think sometimes, catechists can see there's a vulnerability here when you share your own faith life. But I think it's that faith life that's going to have the impact, more so, in some cases, than the facts that we try to teach on the student's own faith development. And so we're leading children to share their faith as we share how we live and what we've learned and what we believe. I think oftentimes time is our worst enemy in our catechetical programs. There isn't enough time for anything. And so how do we construct a curriculum or calendar for the year that allows catechists some time so that it's not just the answers to fill in the blanks, but some of those questions that require students to verbalize and say what they believe and how they think. Sometimes those are the things we kind of have to put aside because we run out of time, and those obviously take longer, but they're important. Catechists need to be an example of their faith, and they're an example of what Catholic identity is all about. They need to provide those opportunities for students to share their faith with each other and their families, their friends. As we look at some of the resources in Sadlier, we'll highlight some of these. But one of the points I'll bring up is what goes home with students from a class where they can share their faith. There are opportunities and resources within the program that are materials that can go home. Are things going home so kids have an opportunity and have them been kind of like cued or given a model of what they can do when they go home to share something with their parents. The next 2 points I want to make about preparing. Sharing your faith doesn't mean you always have to look at your lesson plan. I always did a lesson plan, even though I'm a professional teacher and trained every week when I taught 10 years the second grade. Every week I had my lesson plan, bullet points of what I was going to do, and that's what I used as I worked with the students using their books. The higher up you go in the grades, the more you're just reading a manual, and reading what to do. Kids pick up on that it's not real to you. So you really need to know what you're doing when it's time to do it, so the kids know that at least that you have an idea of the plan for the day and trying to share what's going to happen without having to rely on a manual to tell you step by step what you should be doing. Again, personalizing our teaching. And so know what you're trying to accomplish so you don't have to rely on that manual. So it does mean preparing your lessons in order to have that freedom to be the catechist and sharing your faith. Some suggestions. Let the books go home. I know this is an issue with lots of people, and let the books go home, then they won't come back. And I'll take issue with that. For the 10 years I taught second graders, the books in my class went home every week. And each year I don't think I would need one hand to count the number of kids who may have forgotten a book. I think if you upfront tell the parents with a letter, not just verbally, we're going to be learning about God this year. We have books. We're going to learn stories of Jesus. The books are going to go home so you can see what we're learning, but they need to come every week. I think if you tell parents what you expect, it can happen. And so I think let books go home. Otherwise, what do children have to share? I used to do a weekly letter to parents, and that was my personal choice. As I prepared for my Sunday lessons in the morning, I would Saturday during the day have my lesson plan, and just on my computer type out a little note to parents. Dear parents, this is what we're doing today. I did have a parent, home sheet that went home, but I wanted to personalize a bit, but also just add in some other pieces that may not have been part of that parent letter that I wanted to stress with parents. Again, we'll look at the Sadlier program. What are some parent take-home pieces that can go home to help with that sharing of information? I think catechists, when they can, connect to ministry in the church as they talk in their classes, in their role as catechists, talking about, altar servers, the students who are at the age that they can be part of that, to be part of the church, as lectors, Eucharistic ministers, greeters, priests, and deacons, and explaining that, talking about the word vocation. Vocation comes up a number of times throughout the books. And I like to think of share. I know next week I'll be doing the live dimension of the 6 tasks. I think share and live are so closely related, but I like to distinguish them in 2 ways. Share, I think of as ministry in the church. What we do with our faith community, sharing our faith with others, learning and sharing. Live, I like to think about it beyond the church. So there's where the mission and the missionary idea of our living our faith comes out. So that's my way of thinking about it anyway. Making connections to your parish, local community, example of people sharing and living what they know and believe. And again, providing opportunities for children to talk about their faith. For younger children, it's easy. They'll talk about things, sometimes things you don't want them to talk about. But for older students, it needs to be a safe forum to be able to share their beliefs and questions without judgment, without being put down, but as opportunities for teachable moments to help them to grow in their time of questioning. Invite catechists to invite parents to come to their class. Maybe they can come and help out with a special project, or maybe if there's different books in primary grades that you like to share a story of Jesus with the kids, maybe someone can come and be a guest reader. But getting parents to come in is opening a door, and it's providing opportunity for discussion at home. If there's a large class, maybe a parent volunteer could come each week to help the teacher. Again, it's an opportunity. It's a teachable moment for that student and that child to have some discussion afterwards, but also a learning opportunity for the parent. Personalizing your own prayer. I'm sure this was talked about with the webinar on prayer, but again, why you pray, the importance of prayer. Mother Teresa said, not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. Maybe a shut-in, you think about the shut-ins in your own parish, maybe a classroom care ministry, sharing with them. In my class, I always had a connection with some of the shut-ins in our parish, and I had this poster that hung near my prayer table. Disciples care about others. We care about other members of our parish family. And then I had the names of the shut-ins for that year. And so during the year, you know, we prayed for our shut-ins every week. We sent them cards, the holidays, we made Advent wreath banners for them or Christmas projects. Whatever we did, we made extras and sent them to those people. Those people wrote back to the students. And for second graders, it wasn't enough for me just to share the letter or the note. They had to actually see it for themselves, the writing of the individual. And that was impressive with the kids, that here I am sharing, but I'm hearing back, and they like what I'm doing, and they appreciate. They're learning what it means to be a disciple, to live their faith. I used to use this with my second graders. It was just a tag they could wear with some yarn. Not all the time, but today we learned about reconciliation. Ask me about it. And I would use it when we talked about important things. And obviously reconciliation is a big thing in grade 2. Well, if a child goes home wearing that around their neck and they walk out of my classroom, someone has to acknowledge what's hanging around their neck and say, well, tell me about reconciliation. What's it all about? The We Believe Catholic Identity Edition, we're going to start to look at some components within the book specifically that help to fulfill that shared dimension. Each book has an introductory chapter, and what I find in going around during workshops, in many parishes, most people don't do that introductory lesson. Time, again, is the issue, but I think that if things were planned out, scheduled, because I know there's lessons to do, there's safety lessons, there might be other things that come up. One of the most important critical lessons for catechists to do, the introductory one kind of gets the tone for the book, what they're going to learn that year, but also it talks about the we respond part of the lesson. This one is from, I believe, a 4th grade book. And as you can see, the boy is, saying, when we respond, we reflect and act on what we've learned about God and our Catholic faith. So how what we've just learned affects what we say, what we do, we share our thoughts, feelings, praying to God. So it's pointing out right away, here's an opportunity to think about what we learned and then to use it in our daily life. Excuse me. Project Disciple activities follow every lesson. And there are several pages of Project Disciple activities. Some of them here show what you know, fast facts, and so forth. There are others. There's a whole list of them. They don't all appear in each lesson. And so every lesson has a variety of Project Disciple activities that appear. And on the far right, you see that there is also following a chapter test. I wish it said assessment, but it says test about what we just learned. So each lesson is of 4 faith statements, then is followed by Project Disciple activities, how we see our faith in action. And if you looked at all the variety of those activities, I have a list of them here, they all have sort of a different focus, and for some of them, you can, oops, skipped here. No, it didn't do it. Sorry about that. I had, there was a link here to, some of them, picture this, okay, make it happen, live out what you've learned. Lives of the Saints, role models of people who shared their faith. Take home, sharing faith at home. They all have a variety of different focuses. They all are connected to one of those 6 tasks. And although one might think that Pray Today is always about talking and listening to God, so that prayer dimension, sometimes they may touch on a different dimension. And I'll say right now that in the website there is a correlation for every grade that shows all Project Disciple activities and what dimension they connect to. So that's something that's available. What other resources are in We Believe Catholic Identity that can help? For every unit introduction, there are these Project Disciple Dear Family pages. They're tear out. All the pages in Sadlier are tear out. And this one can go home before the student starts the unit. The teachers can send those home. And it's a heads up to the parents about what kinds of activities the students will be doing during those units, and also a heads up to home activities that they'll be talking about. As I just showed you, there are chapter Project Disciple activities, and they're all aligned to one of those 6 tasks of catechesis. There's a chapter Take Home, where there's a way to share faith at home, and that's on the 2nd Project Disciple activity page on the back of the question page, questions and answers. And so what I have shared in my workshops is that because of time, I tell people, if you're short on time, when you finish your lesson, back into the activities. So in other words, do the page after you've done your instruction of the chapter test, questions and answers, do it orally with the students, then go back to the page on the back side of that. What activities might you do there? Because then, if time runs out and you don't get to the 3rd page, you can tear out the page that had those questions and answers, and that take-home, sharing faith at home, is on the back of it. So you can send it home, and those questions won't go home unanswered, and parents wondering, what do we do with it? And then that other 3rd Project Disciple page you didn't get to is there for the following week as a quick review, maybe at the beginning of a class. But it's not going to go to waste, obviously. One feature that enhances chapters are these sections called As Catholics. These bring in other aspects of our Catholic identity, our traditions, that connect at different lessons as we go through the books. And again, those are good things, but they're like tidbits of information for catechists to bring out and share with kids, and they're important to include and reference as well. One feature of the new Catholic, We Believe Catholic Identity edition, is the inclusion of those Catholic identity retreats. There are 4 retreats based on the 4 pillars of the Catechism. But at the end of the retreat are 2 pages, it's back-to-back actually. One of them is bringing the retreat home, which helps you to share with parents what the students did on that retreat, that mini-retreat. And the other side of that is why we believe as a Catholic family. A question you might get asked, and then what does Scripture say as an answer to that? What does the Church say as an answer to that? Again, those can go home to share with parents. Catholic Identity Home Companion. These are 4 pages at the back of the book, in the student book. They're also based on the 4 pillars of the Catechism. Those can go home anytime. They can be used with the parents in a variety of settings, but each one of them focuses on prayers, practices, our heritage traditions, that they may not be as familiar with anymore. How to look up a reference in the Bible or the prayer of the Angelus. Sometimes those are great when you have opportunities for parent meetings at a particular grade level, tearing one of those out, and all parents would get a copy of that as part of your meeting with parents. So you could share it in that context as opposed to just sending it home. Also, you could go home with a note, a letter to parents. Here's some information that can help you understand more about our Catholic faith that your child is learning about. The website is great if you haven't gone there. There are no passwords. It's user-friendly. Let parents know about the website. Maybe you can have an introduction. Show them how to use it, because, as you know, if you've gone there, their student can sign in on the website as a student. There are interactive activities that they can do at home as a family, as parents. Sometimes we forget that because we may not have the ability to use computers in the classroom, that they do have that ability at home. So let's share that information with parents. Also on the website is in the resources, Gather in My Name. It's a multifaceted approach. It's a whole community catechesis, but bringing people together of all ages to learn about and share their faith. So if you're looking for get-togethers in the course of a year, and there's 4 of those, I believe. In the teacher manual at the back is this page called Sharing Faith with My Family. It's also online in the website, but it's in the manual of the teacher, in the teacher books. These are from a previous edition of Sadlier, and it is a parent page that could go home. What's nice about this page in grades up to grade 3 is that on that page there are pictures from stories or what the kids learned in that lesson, and the pictures the students can then use to tell what they did in class that week. I think that's great for the little ones. This is a picture, and it might be a story of Jesus that they learned about. So those up to grade 3 have some very nice picture cues for the students as prompts for them to share what they've learned with their family. As I mentioned before, there is on the website a correlation to those project disciple activities at the ends of the lessons, to the 6 tasks of catechesis, all the lives of the saints, people who've shared their faith and lived their faith. There's also Catholic Identity Links, which is an online K-8 program with 52 virtues and values, 1 for each week of the year. Also a correlation, which one could go each week with the readings of the week. This would need to be a decision of something to do on a big scale within the program, within the parish, but it provides opportunities for catechists, directors, pastors, information can go in a bulletin sharing the focused virtue this week that we're sharing. Now here we go to the reality checks on things. Parents aren't bringing children to Mass each week. Notice I did not say the children aren't going to Mass. That's not the problem. Parents aren't bringing the children to Mass. So there's the problem to be addressed. So we know that. And in many cases, our formal religious education programs are the primary setting for the faith formation for many of our children. Many parents may not take that responsibility of baptism seriously to bring their children up in the faith. Books don't go home. How can kids share if nothing goes home with them to share? Instruction and witness are critical components. Catechists need to see that they need to do both. And often in their daily lives, as you'll agree, children see and hear the opposite of what we're trying to teach them about what it means to be a disciple. So for catechists, it's all about knowing the 4 pillars, yes, but there are 6 tasks that frame what I do in the classroom. There's the basic right there. Knowing what I'm about, forming disciples, and it's instruction plus witnessing my faith. making connections between what they learn and living as a disciple of Jesus. Those we respond parts of the lesson are important. It's communication and conversations, evangelization, I think, with children, with parents, in addition to the instruction. And it's confidence in sharing their faith with joy and enthusiasm. Pope Francis, the Christian joy is a gift of God that springs naturally from that personal encounter with the risen Christ and faith in Him. Catechists need to have that personal relationship with God in order for the joy of belief to shine through. So what's the challenge for catechists? Well, how do I balance addressing all of the 6 tasks? And time is there as well too. Or we can make it a little bit more complicated. How do I balance that plus student behaviors, learning styles, and range and background? There's a lot we ask of catechists to do, and it's a balancing act. Yes, it's sharing faith, but it's also prayer. It's also showing how to live the faith and that we serve others as disciples of Jesus. So I think we're asking our catechists to do a lot, but I think sometimes they can do it if we tell them what the it is we want them to do and maybe kind of make it easier for them. I think we're asking them to be a one-man band. All the different things we try to do and bring into a lesson, and it's one person doing it. This is one idea I've thought of that I might share in the workshops that I do this year. Taking all of those Project Disciple activities and making a simple bookmark for catechists to use and tell them that, you know, it's disciples in training, and to try and hit those 6 tasks, they need to always, you know, try to mix up the things that they do. And each time they use a Project Disciple activity, put a check next to it. I am sure that every box next to show what you know will be checked, because those are the ones where it's, excuse me, fill in the blank or matching, or there's the very concrete part of the learning. But some of the others, in order to make sure that they're getting rounded as disciples, or I think this is a good way just to tell them, just keep track. You don't have to do everything, but over the course of the year, make sure that you're touching on all of those, so they're touching on all the 6 tasks. And so for catechetical leaders, support your catechists. It's at the classroom level that everything takes place. Make sure they know what the it is that they're supposed to be doing. Give them time and the information and resources that will help them provide the best possible learning environment. They need a map or a blueprint or something. What should I do? What am I focusing on? And if I don't have enough time, what should I do first? And what can I leave till the end? If I have time, I can get to those. And encourage them to personalize their lessons by sharing their own faith. Think out of the box for scheduling opportunities for catechist training and formation. They need both. And provide catechists with experiences to help them connect to their own Catholic identity. Maybe it's a catechist meeting and you talk about the rosary and how it's organized and how you say it. There may be catechists who may not be familiar with that. I remember once when I was DRE, we had a meeting. This was a while ago. And I had the pastor, he had a service of benediction and explained to them what that was. And it was just a very prayerful piece of a meeting. It was part of a meeting. There was the formation. Then we did some training activities. So let's give some experiences to catechists. And those parent resources at the back of the student book, the 4 resources on the 4 pillars, maybe those could even be used with catechists for some catechist formation to help them. The best texts are only as good as the catechist makes them. There's no substitute for good teaching. You won't necessarily find share in a book. It's something we do. You can't share what you don't have and believe yourself. And again, the Christian joy is a gift of God that springs from a personal encounter with the risen Christ and faith in Him. And hopefully that's what we can inspire in our catechists. And Debbie, I think I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you, John. That's a very good presentation, very thorough, as well as you had said, practical ideas, as well as I like the tips for your leadership in working with our catechists. We have about 9 minutes to close this, or before closing, so let me go through some of these questions and comments. First of all, thank you, everybody, for adding some of the materials. Trish writes, the books go home point reminded me of an important issue for families where the parents may not speak the same language as the catechist. What resources and suggestions do you have? I'll start to answer it, and then John, if you want to join in. We do have a bilingual religion program, Creemos Haciendo Discípulos, and the we here at Sadlier, we published our first bilingual program in 1973, and this would be anticipating that Trish, you meant bilingual as in an English-Spanish program. So that is the lens from which I'm answering this. In your chat boxes, you'll see I added a link. There is an overview on the Creemos program if you are interested in viewing that. But I know in what we do here, you'll even see it on our blogs and throughout our website. We try to provide a parallel of the English and Spanish materials, so you would be able to share it with families who, where the parents or the grandparents, the abuelas, do not speak, the native English tongue. Don, do you want to add to that? And how do you work with parents or with situations where the family at home is not English speaking?
Yeah, I think I believe on the website there are some things translated into Portuguese as well. Is that correct?
Yes, there are. Yes.
Portuguese is the website. I think it's a challenge. I know coming from the public school when I was as principal, having to translate things in all kinds of languages. I think if a language is not represented by what Sadlier publishes, there's an opportunity to perhaps get a volunteer in your parish, not as a catechist, but as someone who can help to translate, not everything, certainly, but maybe some things, pieces to help parents, maybe something to help parents to guide them with their children. I think getting a resource person within your own parish that could help with some translation might be a possibility.
Well, that's a great suggestion, and it involves parents.
There's another way to involve someone, not as a catechist, but supporting the catechetical program.
Yeah, that is great. Trish also writes again, and this is a very important point. When John was talking about involving others as well as reaching out into the community on different activities, and Trish adds, don't forget safe environment issues. If you have parents who volunteer to assist the catechist, parents will have interaction with other children. They will need to pass background checks and receive the safe environment program training. I know here in Newark, we have the Virtus program, and even as lectors, or we had to participate in that program.
Right.
Okay. Another suggestion, and this deals with tear-out pages, is, again, Trish, thank you. A suggestion, if your program does not send the book home but tears out pages to send home as each chapter is done, don't have the students write their names in the book. A lot of times that can be wasted passing out books at the start of class when it really doesn't matter as long as you're tearing out the pages and sending them home. And to even consider pre-tearing pages, which is also very, very valid and a great idea. Do you have any other suggestions, John, on and you had mentioned different resources, some of the family pages and that in getting them home?
Yeah, my only caution is the book is a tool for catechists, and I always had my students, in the book underlining or circling or highlighting in yellow crayons. We always, cut out pictures to do projects or make an activity. So you want to make sure that this catechist, if whole lessons go home, then if the catechist wanted to review something a few weeks down the road, the kids forgot, they don't have that opportunity to do it. So I think that parent take-home pages, sending those home, are great. But again, if you're having kids interact with the material and they're using the books, then they would need your name on it. Again, every situation is going to be a little different how we make it work.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We're almost at close. I'm just going to a couple little commercials. April 28th, John will be presenting a session on spiral curriculum. We did have this session yesterday, and it was pretty phenomenal and a value. I recommend, if you are interested, please register to attend. For this also will be a live session. It's a repeat of yesterday, but it is going to be a live presentation. And then on April 30th, John wraps up the last of the 6 tasks of catechesis, which is live, sharing in the mission of the church, which is so much vocalizes the words and the examples of Pope Francis in the mission of the church. You'll find these. I added this link to your inbox where you can register online if you have not yet registered. And then in May, the next slide, please. Kathy Hendricks, our favorite Kathy Hendricks, is conducting a webinar on how to lead a retreat. She does a lot of this work at a spiritual center near her home, and those of you who have seen her speak or have heard her speak know of how she can lead you through prayer and guide you through the experiences. So I invite you also to register, and that will be too at the same registration link as you have for the other ones. And then this is our series, we believe, with Catholic Identity Edition. We have a school edition, a parish edition, the teacher guide for the schools, the catechist guide for the parishes, and then the leader's guide, which connects your retreats as well as a number of other new features in the program there. And then last is the slide that provides our URLs. If you do want to see, preview the program if you're not already using it, we invite you to either view online. You could request samples. You could view entire lessons. A few chapters, different chapters are provided online. Or just contact your Sadlier representative. We know that they would be happy to come in and do a presentation or provide you with the needed samples. So with that, John, do you want to go to the closing prayer? And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We appreciate your being a part of our series. Okay, John?
And I want to echo Debbie's thank you for joining us today. The closing prayer I actually took from grade 3, lesson 1, and it's a project disciple activity. Pray today. Jesus, you invite me to be your disciple. You showed me how to love God the Father with all my heart, with all my soul, and with all my mind. You showed me how to love my neighbors and the importance of loving myself. It's not always easy to be a disciple. I'm grateful for the example you have given me. Jesus, continue to guide me and strengthen me on my journey to be your disciple. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a pleasant rest of the day and a wonderful rest of the Easter season. Oops, I'm sorry. One last question just came in. Okay. Thank you. We'll end already. Bye-bye. Good night.